Did everybody get it?
Yeah, I'm good.
Give me like 2 minutes.
I'm ready.
Yeah. Just like, just so I can go out. Okay. Cool.
Capital operates without borders while migrants are criminalized and imprisoned within a state of precarity trapped in the border regime. This fundamental asymmetry fuels inequality and artificially degrades labor value, posing a new form of racialized violence. Chacon 21. Current stage of U.S.-led capitalist globalization benefit from displacement of people. Labor value has been degraded through criminalization, through investment and profits from labor exploitation, but the dichotomy of open border for capital, restricted border for labor finance, capital these migrant labor charging exorbitant prices for remittances along U.S.-Mexico border. Migrating people die crossing desert, killed by bullets, temperatures, life is squeezed, desperately trying to cross the border, ability to survive precarious conditions as value for capitalism, racialized violence, intrinsic to border militarization, criminalization of cross-border labor, intentional efforts to prevent migrant workers from joining unions, living conditions for all workers will continue to decline, and there's a new crisis of labor exploitation unfolding across the United States. Economic desperation is forcing young migrants into the most dangerous jobs in America with no recourse for labor law violations because they're viewed as disposable and fear deportation. This willful ignorance of the status quo guarantees cyclical invisible violence against the most vulnerable. Dryer 228. Factory full of workers who cross the southern border spending late hours bent over hazardous machinery in violation of labor laws. New economy of exploitation. Migrant children are ending up in the most punishing job shadow workforce driven by economic desperation. Child labor benefits to under-table operations in global corporations. The government knows they're in the United States. Only people getting by were family living off remittances. Growth of migrant child labor in the United States over the past several years is a result of willful ignorance. Government is turning a blind eye to trafficking. Parents know that they'll be turned away, so they send children in hopes remittances will come back. Labor trafficking increasing and the opposite will become one that rewards individuals for making quick releases, persuaded to come by adults who plan to profit from their labor. An agricultural hub with a long history of exploitation. Sponsors see themselves as benevolent but do not grasp the grind that awaits them. Workers said spicy dust from flaming hot chews made their lungs sting, and moving pallets of cereal all made their backs ache. Unaccompanied minors have their leg torn off in factories and their spines shattered on construction sites. Injuries go uncounted, and thus the plan text. Justice requires open borders for human migration across the Mexico-United States border, and opening the borders a material step towards migrant solidarity. It shifts the frame of migrants as illegal and emboldens cross-border harmonization. Chacon 21. Case for opening the U.S.-Mexico border. Border was imposed by Anglo-colonization that had border has spread to repress migrant laborers. Some colonization condition of foreign control through economic means. Workers from the south of the border allowed free movement. Case for opening the borders. Imperative to create cross-border unions, collective bargaining agreements, and other practices blocked by the border. Cross-border strike shows class consciousness, empirical evidence that workers unite and join unions. Anti-capitalist movement against border capitalism, and opening the borders. Concrete process towards twin problems: material deprivation in Central America and the exploitation of undocumented workers in the United States. The AFSA intervention against the negligence of the status quo. 11-228. In Central America, 30 million living in poverty, more profound today. The United States expands immigration opportunities, labor shortages should ease simultaneously. There's no skill mismatch. U.S. policymakers refuse to take the win. Their answers to the twin problems. The Fed will raise interest rates. Officials have stumbled into child labor trafficking, policy cruelty, off which derived negligence. Minors from Central America are performing the most brutal jobs in the economy. Children are lured into the United States by de facto child labor brokers. Much easier for unaccompanied minors than it is for parents to secure a foothold. In the past 2 years, 250,000 unaccompanied minors have entered the United States. There's adults who want to fill the job that Americans can't fill. U.S. has decided it would rather make the country poorer than increase immigration. Letting more adults work in our country should be easy. It looks like we'd rather force Central American families to turn their kids into breadwinners. And the one sees a crucial technology for achieving worker rights for immigrants. It leads to an increase in worker solidarity, empowers ongoing worker struggles. Our argument is simple. Child and immigrant exploitation is bad, and any reduction to it is worth endorsing. Chacon 18. Left case against open borders is reactionary nationalism, flawed conclusions, race together right-wing Trump sees the ideological grounded forces of reaction and legitimize Trumpism, several false premises of 288 free trade agreements, only 40 contain provisions that allow for labor migration. Most of the world do not have the freedom to cross borders. The U.S.-Mexico borderlands and people have died, thousands more have disappeared. Two exploitation immigrant labor through criminalization, immigration policy push wages downwards, further effect of holding all wages down, restriction of immigration allowed employers to divide labor, turn labor history on its head as a result of state repression and subjugation, false promises, workers see immigrants as a threat. Gallup poll shows pro-immigrant majority right-wing labor populism whipping up racism at times of increased labor struggle, populist combined opposition to capitalism and immigration. Capitalist parties curtail access to rights, first shift towards workplace-based enforcement. 2.5 million went on to join labor unions, mass mobilization involving 3 million people, potential for new legalization, surge of labor unions, bigotry has to be overcome, task of international everywhere, solidarity help thousands escape U.S.-supported dictatorships, legal claims run counter to history, and open borders represents a vision of what is actually possible, even if not objectively possible. The one to see steps beyond the realm of immediate experience to take a leap into the unknown beyond the near present. Powder 12. Open borders must not be articulated as a positive utopian dystopian migration, but constitute the end of their spatial fixes. Open borders, non-utopian immigration prevents a powerful critique, critical moment in the dialectical projection, recognizes interdependence between global and other selves. Open borders belongs to the realm of consciousness, present fuzzy contours of an unfixed future. What is possible under existing material circumstances, but involves what's actually possible. And the affirmative understanding that immigration is part of a broader structural analysis of the racialized system that forced migration in the third place. The borders an ongoing site of imperial bonds. Volume 21. Stories circulate about the dead migrants born imperialism by which violences and precarities are structurally created, undoing endeavor to interrogate formation and function of borders as a power structure. Migrant crisis is a pretext to shore up border securitization. Long arc of dirty colonial coups, U.S.-Mexico border formation entangled in indigenous genocide, anti-black enslavement, and racialized expulsion. Narratives of crisis depict threats without implicating crisis of forced dispossession. Displaced people become illegal because technology is acting as a wall to migration, and anything that preserves the regime of madness migration upholds spatial carcerality, greenlights racist policies. You should reject negative advocacy that seek to limit mobility, locking in continued border imperialism. Volume 21. No objective fact of illegality. Borders form a fortress consolidation of spatial carcerality, operate through shared logic of immobilization along color, class, and caste lines. Border and belonging are not experienced equally. Legal routes to migration become a centerpiece of dog whistle politics. Justify racist migration controls. Borders are not fixed. They're generated by social relations of dominance. Monetized and militarized, open to capital but closed to people. Managed migration unambiguously proves requirement.
Cool. Ready for cross?
Mm-hmm.
Does the affirmative open borders to anybody who crosses the U.S.-Mexico border?
Yes.
So
like a Canadian citizen, or like anybody in Mexico from anywhere else can come in.
So
if you're...
So a Canadian citizen can cross the border?
Yes.
Cool. Let's talk about your solvency.
Sure.
You say that capitalism likes to exploit workers who come in as migrants. How does open borders prevent that exploitation?
Yeah, sure. So like the condition of migrant is one associated with like deportability. So companies are able to force migrants into like low wage jobs because they're not formally.
That's the only reason for exploitation?
No. You asked us how the YC solves it, not what are all the factors that cause immigration.
Okay, so no, is that the only thing that allows workers to be exploited? That they can be deported? Is that the
No. There's a couple of arguments. The first is that they're in a state of precarity, right, where they have their ability to be deported, so they're not able to stand up and fight for their own rights because.
Okay, how does the affirmative allow them to fight for their own rights?
Yeah, sure. There's a couple reasons. The first is that it shifts the frame of migrants away from being illegal and deportable. The second thing is unions. Our evidence is really, really good on this. It explains both of our Chacon evidences are. They explain how migrants will empirically join unions, and that allows for cross-border solidarity.
So they're already joining unions?
No, they can't.
You said they empirically join unions.
At post-plan.
How can you empirically do something in the future?
Because there's been times where the United States has opened up the border for large migrations.
Okay, why has the United States opened up the border for large migrations?
Because they wanted to.
Okay, how about this? Let's talk about your impact. Does the affirmative eliminate securitization at the border?
Okay, so there's two things. First, the story of discursive framing. We shift the frame of migrants illegal and deportable. The second thing is there's a whole host of border violence that exists in the border industrial complex, i.e. families, migrants, migrant children specifically working in these factories and across the country. That is something the one you see is trying to solve. Okay,
let's talk about your first Chacon card.
Sure.
It says, quote, capital operates without borders. Then why does capitalism need borders to exploit migrants?
Yeah, sure. So the argument, right, is that corporations and the government are able to move without borders, but when that keeps migrants where they want them, but when you have open borders, then they now have the freedom to move around. So migration is
I get that. No, I get that migrants were now able to move around, but how does that prevent capitalism that operates without borders from exploiting workers?
Yeah, sure. So closed borders is like saying stay in your country, stay in the factory and work. You cannot do anything better. But the 1AC, it gives the freedom of autonomy where people can now move and
that
it's no longer.
That doesn't answer my question. Why does that prevent capitalism from still exploiting workers?
Right, because when people are selectively let into the country, they're selectively put into these bad jobs. When they have the choice whether to go or not, it's not out of desperation. It's also just a question of relieving an instance of border balance.
Cool. 5-off case. Case is gonna be some framing stuff before the advanced number.
Cool.
You're good with B-bar, understand, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Should be set. Actually, I'm gonna take running prep starting now. Never mind. And prep. I should have. There's no new doc. I should have.
Did you send it?
440. Yes.
Okay. 440.
Mm-hmm. I'll just stay here. It makes it easier.
Cool. I'm good.
You good?
Alright.
Cool. First off, capitalism ensures extinction, inequality, climate, ABR, war. Poster 2019. Capitalism fuel poverty, hunger, economic local deaths, soaring unemployment, damage income, needing the union reduced to child 3 mentioned in the U.S. and more and half the U.S. population, healthcare, housing, and education, war out of reach, 5 million homeless in the U.S. overuse by capital actors leading to economic systems with superbugs, 2 million in the U.S. are behind bars and Asian cohorts, and perpetual normal regions, threats to estimated global thermonuclear chain over 10%. More numbers, the world economy generating climate change, social identification, the 616 toxic chemical radioactive pollution, 86% of the world repopulation, wiped out from 1971 will be locked in irreversible major corporations, life of climate denial, so corporations accelerating extraction, war depletion, and resources destruction of the environment, parasiting future economic benefits, and the 1AC is a tool of big business, open borders, destroy labor, organizing, fracture worker, and solidarity, and such a deeply exploited system of global neoliberal expansion. There's a reason that Zuckerberg is writing out cards. This link is specifically in the context of the U.S.-Mexico border, NACO 2018. The destruction of labor politics means immigration play out within the cultural world borders, long made around crime, business, abundant, alternative, libertarian, vegan, and champion, migration, power, needs to be as possible, lower return to be easier, place of borders, are for the boss of Boston, universally borders, strong needs, founding national solidarity, workers, movement, raise inflation, non-white member, organization, called Black American individual, weakening the absolute workers, movement, the Senate, preventing exploited migration, all attention, actives, having useful to big business of borders, benefits, at least, powers, organized labor, troops, working against workers, march on, extension of the colonial system, tactics, secret by which the capitalist maintains class, maintains its power over importation, a low paid labor, tool oppression that divides worker, liberalized trade policy, destroying regional economy, which release mass immigration, migrant force, access, farmers, complete the U.S. agriculture, which dropped 22%. Cut the 100%, and open borders are crucial to sustaining neoliberalism and exploiting migrants in 2020. Individuals, markets, businesses, neoliberals require free move. People need to go where they can maximize value. Restriction, immigration are doing neoliberals, damaging business, suffering to migrants, and then labor and put down pressure on wages, status, and have to look after them the more he's exploited. And the alternative is directly affirmative favor of an unconstitutional commitment to democratic social rule. The judgment question capitalism, your ideology, precondition to prioritize neoliberal values, valuing the ideology of the 1AC is a prior question of whether or not the 1AC is a good idea. I 2019. Democratic social requires institutions also to shape, cultivate, and transform commitments. Only revaluation of value allows increasing freedom and decreasing the the means of protection or equality. Only have use for profit as long as the means of private use for profit are well possessed exploitation of labor. We decide the democratic process how will we produce based on abilities and needs under capitalism with collective self-determination. Undemocratic purpose is to generate profit despite exploitation and unemployment and overproduction. We see ourselves as subject to each according to ability, each according to his needs, sharing social necessarily, but also reducing it through innovation and force to participate. We will need intrinsically motivated social protection for the common good of our own freedom. And second off, justice requires the United States to open its border to human migration across the Mexico-United States border. Justice requires the Mexico closes borders to the human migration of American and Canadian citizens. And foreigners moving into Mexico drives up high housing prices and inequality. Gentrification is a newest form of cultural imperialism. Roger 22. Driving factors is political realm of the U.S. since Trump. People are fed up. Americans cannot afford to live in their country. Inflation, the lower cost of living in Mexico, the number one destination demand is so high that is there not enough housing gentrification by via correlation of prices where those White Houses have gone up 20%. Most Mexicans receive a monthly income of $400 put in properties out of regional earnings are doing more harm than good. And Gentrification caused mass structural violence, poverty, inequality, and instability that linked turns case by forcing people to move. Wilson 23. Accelerated gentrification causes attention to impossible living for local Mexicans, setting prices above inflation, high eviction to become common. Renters' social contracts will not be renewed. Rents are assigned $1,500 per month. Minimum wage is $8 per day. Workers are spending more time community laboring in sectors like catered to remote workers. Maybe 30% of Mexico City residents struggle to pay rent. 19% have to move because the rent increases. Very crowded subways, bathrooms converted to condos, and homeless encampments. Travelers boasting about how cheap everything is when prices are far from cheap for locals. And third off. 2023 showing a growing gradual movement away from populism, especially in Latin America and the US, winter and 2023. Number of populist leaders have fallen to a 20-year low. 2023 could be decisive. Bolsonaro defeated a relatively close election. Populism is defined by moral conflict with outside as much of the climate occurred in Latin America with election of moderate leftists that have reduced around populist rhetoric in the major and its spectrum failed to be elected. They also every state election for election administration Congress welcomed effort to return 2020 election defeated Trump's rejection. May not signal long-term defeat of cultural populism. And empirics prove open borders is the strongest driver of a global move towards populism. Died in 2019. Populism main drivers among cultural migration, cultural backgrounds, by popular immigration much more than economic distress, religious border, hospitals, immigration, populism, speak about migration, existential and natural culture, where populism creates difficult to read for central left, willing to build credibility with the political spectrum, polarizing, absurd, build consensus, and coalition, really, usually a modular community, fear, causing populism everywhere, criminal barriers, and demographic decline, such as economic stagnant, unable to retain people, they're losing confidence in the future of countries feels run by immigration, especially just those with economic immigration, resulting in burden. And this is especially true with US Mexico and empirics prove, shade 21. Reaction and Trump's obsession about immigration has been central. Immigration has transcended into danger to the nation. Immigration become highly nationalistic. The US focus on the entire immigration across the southern border races. Argument was far more prevalent in the US politics because of strongly anti-immigration on both sides under South and Central America, and they're viewed as mostly bad. And populism escalates after sanctions to end nuclear war, global warming, and mass structural violence. Evans 22. Pandemics, global warming may begin to energize, but the risk of annihilation by nuclear weapons which anyone has had up to 1 in 6 chances in the century, human life will go drowning, could be extraordinary extreme public populism, setting computer accelerator, recycling, threats for hard science, institution, global independent cooperation, populism are anti-intellectual, anti-institutional, anti-international, anti-iranic, the populists have become authoritarian demagogues returning from Hitler to Trump. And backlash to softly protective measures are undertaken by nativist movements to ensure border security. Barrier component 2009. The organized anti-immigrant movement has exploded. Native extremists target people around the policy after immigrants themselves using our vigilante border control. Native extremist groups are active in all regions in the U.S. East. Nationwide organization must volunteers for vigilante border controls. Many protest actions or conduct surveillance offset native members openly carry firearms have also spewed a slew of immigrator and splinter groups. Fourth off. Just requires the abolition of the Mexico-United States border and its mutually exclusive border is not the same as abolishing borders, which also means that your app stops and the necessity exists in the border. The Canada is not the net benefit is the entire app. Nothing about the one I see about open borders, just about how borders themselves are flowing to reject one area, new one area definition of open borders, the cause of one area shifting like breaking debates. Border 2017. Open border scenario assumes the territorial border continue to exist. No border scenario entails that there are no borders at all. This requires radical transformation of borders. No open borders imagination from the territorial nature of governance. No border imagination eliminating nation states and borders altogether. And no current fight opening border. The average starts the right of borders to exist, meaning they can never solve. Yale 2019. The very concept of open border implies that whatever is open will continue to exist after the movement has already been established. It can never close again. The open border is not binding under abolition by comparatively illegal to close border. Borders would cease to exist. Border abolition would entail Russian sovereignty away from nation states. Open borders can serve as a continuation of the strategy of accumulation by dispossession that characterizes exploitive capitalism by reproducing problematic relations. Skip the fifth off case. Existential threats outweigh all life as infinite value and extinction. It eliminates the possibility for future generations. Every negative weakness of innate cognitive biases. GPP 2015. Existential catastrophes would destroy the future. This future could be long and flourishing, have extreme large value. Existential catastrophe would give future generations nothing extra choice receive thus attention that is more than cognitive rise. Also lead people to underestimate since there are limited enough catastrophes in the magnitude of their these risks are not salient to politicians in the public and other cognitive rise. The scope of people become numb to saving lives and the never gets too large, particularly acute for existential because the numbers of cities are so large. Skip the next card on advantage. One of those all causes exploitation, lack of support system, pre-existing poverty, and language barriers all ensure exploitation. And second, the workers rise income inequality. Best studies prove. Boris 2016. When supply workers goes up, price higher goes down, and 10% increase lowers wages, less 3% after economy fully adjusts the workers up, and those monetary losses, cyber abuse, like elimination, or quickly dismiss current workers when they find cheaper immigrant workers, immigration reduce wage well from those who compete to those who use from the loyal less redistribution, and so north $500 billion a year immigrants, reaching government assistance, the higher rates, the higher costs, and lower taxes and applies immigration creates a fiscal hole of fiscal burden off like gain wages, apparently employed immigration tries to be another income redistribution. And skip the next card. Open border restrictions, unprecedented wave of brain and rejects that best active for neighbors who may urban rule to urban migration, reject one area cities, they want to assume a world fully open borders. 2021. Open borders affect manpower, weaker economy, self-organization, explain to urban migration within states. Perfect product within states. I'm ready to cross.
Cool. Okay. The second off, what is the how does that solve the F?
Yeah, so we'd say the entirety of your affirmative is about migration from.
The one you see requires cross-border migration to create cross-border solidarity through unions and stuff. The counterplan does not let people back into Mexico. How does it solve?
It does let people back in Mexico. It specifically says that it just bans the human migration of American Canadian citizens.
Right. That's okay. But American and Canadian citizens are going to be the one in the union. So how does it solve the union?
A, no, you have no evidence that says the only way to join a union is by becoming a citizen. B, we would say that human migration is like permanent migration, i.e. if somebody wants to like return for a vacation or return to their home, that's not human migration.
How does it kind of solve if all non-citizens can go into Mexico? Like why are American Canadian citizens key if every other migrant in the world can still come to Mexico?
Our Roger 22 card is specifically saying that the people who are moving and who are the problem are US and Canadian citizens. A. B is that we would say this solves for entirety the affirmative. It's all about exploitation that is going to be happening in the United States, which we solve.
Okay, gentrification. Your card is descriptive of the status quo. Why is the impact not happening now?
Uniqueness, like Mexico closes its borders. A. B. The app makes it worse. If you say you open borders.
Why? Okay, fine. The populism decide. Why is it bad for white people to get mad that immigration's happening?
Number of warrants for this. A is that our Bayrick and Potok 2009 card talks about how surges in populist movements lead to surges of racialized violence that make lives.
Well, no. You can't like redo border security after the NAC like gets rid of it. But I don't understand why white people getting mad is like good.
Yeah.
Like,
so A is that our card is specifically.
So your argument is that white people.
Our card is not about border security itself. It is about our vigilante troops. It's not about the government enforcing border security.
But no. If racialized violence happens already in America, why is like this a question?
I argue like populism is way worse. Like yes, sure, maybe racialized violence is non-unique, but that doesn't mean that.
Your argument is that white people are going to get mad and then do violence, and that's why. But that happens
I would say racialized violence is bad. A. B is that our first card, specifically Winter and Elga 23, provides uniqueness to the populism term.
Okay, no, that's in the context of America. The abolition counterplan, you read an AF card by accident. How is this competitive?
It's not an AF card. Border 2017 specifically delineates between open borders and no borders.
Right,
I can read it for you.
And what's like the net benefit?
Net benefit is solves the app better, and
what's the word for that?
Also populism decide. Because you reassert the right of borders to exist.
Okay.
The no borders counterplan doesn't.
Why does extinction outweigh?
Sorry.
Why does extinction outweigh?
Yeah. Our first card is really good on this.
What is your bright line of solvency of of preventing extinction for it to be relevant?
I'm not sure what you mean by bright line. Obviously.
Like how much do you have to mitigate extinction for it to like come before black and brown people from dying?
Yeah, so we would say that extinction causes black and brown people to die because it kills everybody. A. B is that we would say.
Yeah, but what is your threshold of solvent? Okay.
We're gonna live like to extinction, so it doesn't matter. I skipped the fifth off, by the way, just to be clear.
Status of the counterplayers?
Content.
Can the cap turn into a floating pig?
No.
145. I'm setting it down. It's case K, the first counterplan, the abolition counterplan, and then the populism dissent.
There's a dog.
Yeah.
Question mark?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll let you know when I get it.
Okay. And do you?
Yeah, run me through the order one more time.
Yeah, sure. It's case, critique, the Mexico counterplan, the abolition counterplan, the populist dissent. Wyatt, you good?
Mm-hmm.
Anthony? Cool.
Immigration is fundamentally asymmetrical because capital moves freely while migrants are stuck on what it sees a material intervention to level the playing field, which statistically increases the quality of life for migrants. Also concede that social factors make migration inevitable to the United States, which means the debate is over. It's just a question over what the journey looks like. The one to see purely proven to spur union participation. That's such a cone evidence that causes cross-border solidarity, which checks back against neoliberal border regimes. The border card is non-unique because immigration is inevitable. I'll answer the extinction first. Something conceded the thesis that the one to see securitization of the border and migrants is to justify the continued border balance militarization from the debate through the wall. The evidence is only from the analysis military border complex role in securitization means the real impact of their work. The impact turning the reading of the dissent and reconstruction of the securitization of the border feeds into the fear produced by the military border complex to make money at the expense of racialized violence means you hold their impact to a high burden and prove the critique. One, perm of the opposite direction of the Greek, the net benefits immediately eliminating the border labor market. Two, perm to the opposite opposite starting point analysis of racist crucial because any other words is universal and always conscious with carefully covered layered inequalities within capitalism. Three, perm to the all opening words and key demand of the working class that should code 21 if it's for perm to the opposite the all is only for transnational moves occurs open borders because borders fracture the global working class and all 3 point the naval evidence or code evidence is directly responsive to article A effect or naval since the left should join the all right against migration that sees ideological ground of forces reaction that emboldened Trump like candidates who turns the party to breeding ground for exploitation be no class analysis since the workers are already mobile. That's illogical. That was above 2 for those class analysis because only both the people have the limited mobility. 3 misreads Marx. He denounces that the quote bigotry of immigration restrictions C empirically disproven. Nagel says workers see immigrants as a threat but contact take help. This was pro-immigrant sentiment is resilient and all 2 by the key evidence. It's about Australia which means analysis is not apply and linked to be solved for the war for why immigrants are exploited by leaving them from a state of precarity, allowing migrants to vote and join unions and gain power to protect exploitative capitalist conditions. The counterplan. One perm to the option did not let American citizens go to Mexico for human migration, for permanent residence. 2 perm to build and 3 anything else, anything that preserves the regime of managed migration, upholds spatial carcerality, greenlights racist policies, which means the counterplan still upholds all the racialized discourses of the border, can't solve any of the affirmative, but it still locks in inequality through the border, which outweighs any of their impacts for it. Can't solve because it doesn't allow for cross-border solidarity. That's the best way for solving wages in Mexico. The household is better. That's also the code evidence. 5 it links in that benefit because it is getting rid of the United States border. 6 the impact is already going to happen. The Rocha evidence is scripted. The status quo is already too late in the process. Also, the counterplan doesn't solve because you still allow people into vacation to Mexico, the abolition counterplan. One perm to the after the open borders of prerequisites to abolish border solving the benefit and competition argument Yale 21. Open borders and open borders except to abolishing states. No border politics be rejected territorial jurisdiction when they do so when they go so to the same one can advocate for rights. We're trying to build differences that we don't ask about just we wind up legitimate what should only be endured. And 2 perm to but no reason is competitive. You literally read an app card. We read a card from an open border. If you open the article, it's an advocate of open borders and solvency deficit to the counterplan and for it links to all the net benefits. But if they have because they're just still opening borders, they haven't proven a reason why open borders are uniquely bad, which means the perm to the after the neg is valid and the populism dissent. 1. The thesis of the dissent is wrong. The impact takes a year because the election not till 2024, which means we got way on time for 2 uniqueness overall selling populism stay low because we're at an all-time low populist leader. Structural factors like warming will keep it low. 3 all causes liberal policies, globalization, Trump, and illegal migrants, all trigger populism. And 4 total link is non-unique immigration to which means populism have regard to the 5 link turnover 1 when percentage of immigrant voters rises, they can create a block and fight against populism. 6 link turnover to decrease the number of undocumented migrants to solve the war in their beyond evidence. 7 the impact is non-unique populism ebbs and flow, but it never caused extension. Brazil shifting back and forth almost every year proves. And 8 go plan fully risk of populism in the United States who think they don't access the full weight of the impact already. You shouldn't grant them that. And the cruelty is the point. The anger of white men is what determines the end of results of policy making. Many that will perpetuate the same issue. White is able to use his position to determine the outcomes for other racialized body parts must be resistant voting negatively concession to legacy white cruelty for those takes. 18. Amidst words of perseverance, Haji dealt Trump the artifacts of inhumanity, barbarism, face the white men in the crowd. They took in pleasure in the cruelty of torturing others so proud when they closed out with their handiworks or caught the eye of the lid to the world, but no, they've been there serving their cruelty, made them feel proud closer to one another. One malice embraces impossible to be certain. The border patrol agents cracking up and crying immigrant children separated from their family, mocking Puerto Rican accents after thousands were killed and displaced by Hurricane Maria. The president and his ally supporters are donated entitled to protection to law. The rest with entitled only cruelty by the women. And no impact populism will not stop to meet that benefit them on the international stage. No war, LA or LAO collapse effect sorted on Medal 21. Populism war what makes their state stronger. Analysis of what government facilitatable to their reasons and Paris agreements to promote image India left wing populism be open to corporations, regional corporation lost by Latin American leaders are cases in point.
Cool. 4 minutes and 40 seconds left, starting now. No independent voters, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, no independent voters?
Yeah, correct. There are 0 independent.
Cool. Cool. Let me send out the card.
Cool. Order.
Hold on, let me set the card out first. Okay, it's insane. Order is going to be Cap K, abolition, counterplan, populism, disad, pig, case.
One more time.
Cap K, abolition, counterplan, populism, disad, counterplan, case. Everyone good? Did y'all get the card?
Oh, wait. Here, let me just paste this. Okay, okay.
On the Cap K, conceded the no link and kicking the all, which means there's no uniqueness for any of their terms because purpose are just a competition, not an actual advocacy. Abolition, counterplan, kicking it, always condo, populism, disad. I'm conceding that there's no impact on populism, which means they don't get any of their link terms, but on this Rex K thing they kind of make one, and that is not a reason to drop the debater, is that it wasn't said in the 1AR, which you should hold the line on because new to our argument makes theory debates impossible the next time, no to an R hold them when they actually said in 1AR, and B is they explicitly said it that there were no voters in Flex, but I don't treat them that's okay to lie, and B is you choose to drop the argument on the team. It's the only way to foster learning and encourage people to learn from their mistakes, which is key for anti-racist movements and building up coalitions. And 3 is that the rule of balance is over, that's policy option A, there's no spillover to outside rounds, and purely disproven by people going for cap food one round, and then cap at the next, and B there's no 1AR, no new 1AR reps, roll the ballot, and kills predictability, across everything I said before, and C is that they win any representation stuff though, any offense of the pick is a reason our representations are good, and a retreat to this impact is just a way of avoiding the fact that their app causes material violence, structural violence in Mexico. Pick. I'm extending the pick that justice requires the United States to open its border to human migration across the Mexico-United States border while Mexico closes its borders to immigration from U.S. and Canadian citizens. It's also the entirety of the 1AC. The entirety of the 1AC is about black and brown people moving across the Mexican border into the United States and then being exploited in the United States. Go back and read the 1AC. They have read no evidence about people moving from the United States to Mexico being necessarily key, which means that the pick sells enough of the 1AC, or at least use efficiency framing. If we solve for enough of the 1AC, then any risk and net benefit outweighs, especially since it goes straight up conceded. I'm extending our Roger 22 card, which says that people will want to move to Mexico, which drives up housing prices and inequality. There are a couple examples of this. Because inflation is so bad and the democratic system in the U.S. is so bad right now, it means that people are going to be moving from the United States to Mexico, which drives up housing prices because there's more demand, and the people who are moving from the United States tend to be the rich and the wealthy. This means that Mexican people literally do not have homes because the prices are being driven up. In fact, our Roger card says they're being driven up 20%. That is a huge increase. It means that people are moving. Our Wilson 23 card is really good on this. That causes mass poverty. If people can't afford if people have to spend more money on their rent, then they can't do other things like buy basic things like food, water, housing. B is that it causes mass inequality as people from the West get to have cheaper living in Mexico, but people who are Mexican locals aren't able to actually access this, which furthers global inequality and furthers global neoliberal inequality. C is that it causes mass instability because Mexican people are obviously upset about the fact that foreigners are coming in and stealing all of their land, and stealing all of their housing, which means that people are forced to move, which means that only we solve for the root cause of people moving from Mexico to the U.S. in the first place, insofar as we reduce inequality and mean that there's no drive for people to move and make sure that they're not being exploited. I'll do that on my line now. On the first perm A, that human hold them to their plan text. They specifically talk about open borders for human migration, and human migration entails permanent movement with intent to settle. Britannica 22. Human migration is the permanent change of residence by an individual group. It includes movements that are transitory by nature. And B is hold them to their cross-sex explanation. They said anybody can move, including American and U.S. Canadian citizens. You should hold them to that. The second perm to both argument makes no sense. We have deliberately not allowed for open borders where Mexico is not. It's actually closing its borders with the U.S., which means that it is not competitive. 3 is that we're not preserving the regime of managed migration. In fact, we are a move against it. We say that Mexico completely closes off its borders, which means that since their only link is to people moving for work, we eliminate people moving to Mexico for work, which means there's no risk of this sort of worker exploitation thing. A, B is that we solve all their managed migration systems are all reasons why the American migration system is bad, i.e. the American version of managed migration is bad, which is exactly why we get rid of it. The counterplan obviously solves the entirety of the affirmative. The Walia evidence they cite is only about people moving from Mexico to the U.S. B B is that it says it can solve because it doesn't allow for cross-border solidarity. Yes, it does. A is that we have specifically said that we solve better wages in Mexico because it means that since people can move from Mexico to the U.S., they have to compete. Mexican companies have to compete with American companies in terms of the amount of job security that it provides, which means we do solve for wages in Mexico because all of their stuff is about movement from Mexico to the U.S., which means it's a terminal solvency deficit. They say it links to net benefit, but no, it doesn't, because we close off borders, which means people from the U.S. can't move to Mexico. It means that it can't solve. Then they say that the impact is already going to happen, which is exactly why we provide uniqueness claim, which allows us to close the border, and B is that the affirmative uniquely makes it worse because they completely open borders, which opens a gateway for people who don't already want to be violating the law. And C is that on the perm debate back, a severance of the voter rejects net ground and causes 1AR shiftiness that get late-breaking debates that skirt out of class and destroy substantive education. Look, all their solvency deficits are in the context of people moving from Mexico to the U.S. Even if they're trying to make it seem so in the 1AR or the 2AR, their evidence is not in the context of people moving from U.S. to Mexico, which means you hold the line for half shiftiness case. They conceded that there are a bunch of alt causes, so independently you can judge take the counterplan and net benefit alone outweighs. There are a lot of alt causes to exploitation. Even if you open the border and make it so that people can't be deported, that doesn't mean that they can't be exploited. A is a lack of a support system in the new country they're moving to. They are moving away from family and friends, which means that they are more vulnerable in this society, in American society, even if they can't be threatened to be aborted. And B is that since people who are moving are people who are desperate, the people who are moving don't actually have a lot of money and probably aren't that secure in the first place, which means that this pre-existing poverty will prevent them from getting a good job or prevent them from actually increasing their wages. And C is that they've conceded massive language barriers. Many immigrants who are moving from Central America or across the Mexican border do not have as good of an English or have a heavy accent, which causes mass discrimination even within workplace environments, which is an independent reason why the gentrification caused by open borders outweighs.
Cool. What was your answer? Did you concede the link to populism?
And the impact D.
Of 15.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Okay, it's the aff, the counterplan. Cool. Pretty good.
It is really easy to vote after this debate. There's three issues in this debate that mean you're voting affirmative. The first issue is that they misunderstood our claim about the affirmative, is that migration is fundamentally asymmetrical and that it happens inevitably because corporations can selectively choose who comes into the country, like the Cuban refugee crisis where America deported millions of immigrants and only brought back the ones who were good workers, which proves that all of their impacts are not unique. They say there's a bunch of all causes, but it's just they conceded our thesis claim. It's just a question of what the journey looks like, which means that insofar as we alleviate an instance of border balance, you vote affirmative. If that balance happens anyway, it's better for them to not be forced into factories working and abused by CBP officers, which means that a risk of offense still comes through, and it's easy to vote after on the counter plan. Here are the second two reasons that you're voting affirmative. First, their Borcha card is descriptive of the status quo. To quote the 2NR, they said that migration is causing a quote 20% increase now, which proves that there's only marginal offense. Since gentrification has already been set into place, there's no reason how the 1EC uniquely causes any of these impacts, which means that if you're confused on how to evaluate the debate, you just vote affirmative because it's guaranteed solvency. The second reason that you're voting affirmative on the counterplan is that they uphold zones of spatial carcerality. A quote from the 2NR is that people coming to Mexico are, quote, stealing land, which is the framing of the migration invasion that we have said is bad. They don't consider that people returning to Mexico are family members. They're just separating families through the counterplane, and which is not good because our argument is that when you separate families, kids are forced to go into the country and work on remittances. They separate families because people cannot go back into Mexico once they get citizenship, which means that's a terminal solvency deficit to the counterplane. But another thing is that they also conceded that they can't solve because people will still go into and vacation in Mexico. They've conceded our argument that people will still go in vacation because they have human migration, which is permanent migration, and people are still going to go over for vacations, which means it'll still drive inequality and inflation up, which proves that there's absolutely no offense coming onto the counterplan. So if I'll do the weighing right here. They've not done enough weighing for you. They just explained to you why gentrification in Mexico is bad. They've not given you a break for why that happens, why the affirmative triggers it. They've just given you a bunch of descriptions of the status quo that explain how it's already happening, which means that you vote affirmative because we are the ones actually eliminating the border industrial complex in which children are working in factories and fueling capitalist inequality, and that's a reason. And they've also continued our argument about unions driving up wages, which proves that people will be able to increase their wages and therefore decrease inflation. That's just like basic economic laws, which proves that the cross-border solidarity fostered by the 1EC will decrease inflation in the world of the 1EC, while the counterplan cannot, which means that structural factors mean the counterplan will never solve. The affirmative is just a better option. There's way too many solvency deficits in the counterplan that they conceded. This is easy to evaluate.
Debate.